You don't need to forgive your mother. That's right. That's not what you truly need to be free. What's holding you captive is not her. It's the version of her you've unconsciously nurtured in your mind, since the years before you could even speak. An image that's haunted every reaction, every relationship, every choice you've made when no one was watching. And here's the truth no one wants to hear. You're no longer fighting your mother. You're fighting her shadow, the one living in your unconscious, carrying her voice, her eyes, her disappointment, her expectations, her silence, or criticism she once placed upon you. In this video, you won't just hear about the mother wound, but the deconstruction of the entire unconscious emotional system shaped by the mother figure that has ruled your life. You'll understand why, even if your mother is no longer present, you still live as if you're a child desperately trying to be loved. And most importantly, you'll be given the tools to reclaim your mental sovereignty, break the cycle of pain, and rebuild the inner image of your mother, once and for all. It's time to face what you've avoided for years. No one can save you, except you. And that begins by confronting the shadow called mother. Right now, we're stepping into the deep layers of Jungian psychology, where the truth might hurt, but is exactly where your healing begins. 1. Mother complex, the blueprint that still runs your life. She left a long time ago, but every time you're criticized, you shrink as if bracing for a blow. You fall into relationships where you beg for love and still feel not enough. You succeed, but sabotage it just before the finish line. You think it's your personality? No, that's the mother complex. Carl Jung called it the mother complex, an unconscious emotional system formed in the early years centered around one figure, the mother. It's not your actual mother, but the subjective experience of her as a child and the way your immature nervous system recorded every glance, touch, word, or silence. If your mother was often stressed, cold, or overly demanding, you grew up believing you had to do more to be worthy of love. If your mother was physically present but emotionally absent, you grew up confused, unsure what safety or acceptance really meant. And if your mother was wounded and never healed, you may have become the one who carried both of your emotions. The mother complex doesn't die when you grow up. It becomes an invisible blueprint guiding how you respond to life, especially to closeness, to love, and to yourself. Why do you feel guilty for setting boundaries? Why do you feel uneasy when someone loves you too much? Why are you exhausted from trying to be a good person? Because the child in you is still trying to please mother. And until you realize that, you're not living your own life. You're reliving an old script written by a mind that never knew freedom. Up next, you'll see more clearly how that script was written and how to break it before it breaks more of you. 2. The archetype unmasked. When the inner mother becomes your inner critic, there's a voice inside your head. It's not yours, but you hear it every day. It says you're not good enough, that you have to be better, that if you fail, you'll be abandoned. That's the inner mother, the distorted mother archetype that's become the one tormenting you daily. Carl Jung called it an archetype, a primal pattern, a psychological mold existing within the collective unconscious of humanity. The mother is one of the most powerful archetypes, the origin of life-nurturing safety. But that's exactly why, when it's distorted, it becomes an invisible prison. If you grew up with a controlling, critical, or inconsistent mother, the inner mother in you learned how to love conditionally. She's no longer warm and safe arms, but an inner judge, always watching, always doubting, always waiting for you to fail, just to confirm, "See, I told you you weren't good enough." The problem is you think that's your reason. But no, it's the echo of an unhealed wound. A child who learned to be loved, you must be obedient. To be accepted, you must sacrifice. To stay, you must abandon yourself. And the tragedy is, you started using that same voice to raise yourself. You became your own inner mother. But instead of healing, you kept punishing. That's not strength. That's repeating the trauma under the disguise of adulthood. You can't heal if you haven't recognized the archetype living inside you. The mother archetype is not your enemy, but if you don't consciously integrate it, it will own you. Coming up, you'll see how this archetype invades your current relationships and how to escape the emotional trap you never realized you were in. 3. How she shows up in your relationships. Repetition of the emotional script. You thought you left your mother in the past, but take a closer look at how you love, how you fear being abandoned, how you test your partner to see if they truly care or are just putting up with you, how you stay silent instead of voicing your needs because you fear that speaking up is selfish. That's not love. That's an old script being replayed. And the one writing the script is the child within you still trying to be seen and validated by the inner mother. You don't choose your lovers. The mother complex chooses for you. You're drawn to unavailable people because it feels familiar. If your mother was distant, unresponsive emotionally, you will feel safe in relationships where you have to overextend just to feel loved. It's the kind of love that feels like running through a desert. The thirstier you are, the more you chase. And each time you're hurt, you don't leave. You try harder. You think that's loyalty. But the truth is you're still searching for a mother who was never really there. If your mother was controlling, you tend to stay in relationships that make you feel small, manipulated. Or worse, you become the controlling one, because that's the only model of connection you ever knew. You're not in love. You're reenacting a tragedy, an emotional script you didn't write, but you live in it every day. And here's the bitter part. Even when you meet someone kind, sincere, you still don't trust them because the child in you was never loved unconditionally. It doesn't understand love that comes without control or conditions. It will find ways to sabotage the relationship just to be heard in a familiar way. Intimacy terrifies you because to you, the closer someone gets, the more it hurts. The easier it is to see the disappointed look from your mother again. This is when you must ask yourself, am I loving? Or am I replaying the memory of being abandoned? Am I connecting? Or am I begging for a love I never had? When you begin to recognize the presence of the inner mother in every relationship, you finally gain the power to choose again. To choose love, not to be healed, but because you've begun healing. And coming up, we'll dive into an invisible force, the one that keeps you stuck even when you know all of this. A kind of toxic loyalty that took root in your soul when you were just a child. 4. The myth of loyalty. When love becomes a prison, there's a kind of prison that needs no bars, no warden, yet it can hold you captive your entire life. It has no name, no shape, but it shows up in every choice you don't dare to make, every dream you shelve, every opportunity you quietly sabotage. That's the unconscious loyalty to your mother's pain. You never said it out loud. No one asked you to sacrifice. But there's a part of you that believes if you're happy, if you rise, if you live a life your mother never had, it means betrayal, abandonment, ingratitude. Carl Jung called this one of the strongest psychological bonds between parent and child, when the child not only inherits the bloodline, but also carries the emotional legacy. And the most dangerous part, it's a contract you never signed, yet you've lived by it for years. You'll notice it in moments when you approach success, then suddenly pull back. When love gets deep, you turn cold, distant. When someone sees your real worth, you find a reason to doubt, not because you don't want happiness, but because there's a voice whispering inside. If I do well, what will my mother think? Will she feel left behind? Will she still love me? You learn to dim your own light so others don't feel lonely, but the more you do that, the more you shrink your life into a smaller version of the past. And that thing called loyalty is actually a secret contract with pain, where you vow never to rise, never to surpass her, never to leave the cycle of suffering your family has been trapped in for generations. A woman once said, "I turned down a promotion to director because my mother never had that chance. I felt guilty if I had something she didn't." It may sound like gratitude, but in truth, it's the fear of severing your roots, the fear that success means separation, disconnection, becoming a stranger to the one who gave you life. You weren't born to continue suffering for your mother. You're not obligated to live small so others feel comfortable. You're not betraying love when you choose healing. You're simply ending the cycle. And sometimes the bravest act of love is daring to step out of a darkness someone else couldn't leave behind. Next, we'll peel back an even deeper layer, a haunting kind of relationship where a child is forced to grow up too soon and become the adult in the family. A kind of love no one names, yet it leaves millions of people exhausted without knowing why. 5. Emotional incest and guilt bonding. When you're parentified, have you ever felt like you had to take care of your mother's emotions? Not in obvious ways like cooking or doing laundry, but deeper, like being her emotional support, the one she cries to, vents to, shares her burdens with. While you were just a child, if you ever played that role, you didn't just lose your childhood. You became a victim of something dangerous called emotional incest. It has nothing to do with sex. It's when a parent, usually the mother, instead of nurturing her child's emotions, pulls emotional energy from the child like a lonely, wounded adult seeking refuge. And the child, driven by survival instinct and a need to be loved willingly, takes it on. From that point on, you're no longer the child, but the best friend, the listener, the substitute for your mother's emptiness. You're not allowed to have needs. You have to be okay so she won't worry. You must grow up faster than you should. And the most painful part, you feel guilty every time you try to live for yourself. This is guilt bonding, a connection forged through guilt. The love between you and your mother is no longer unconditional. It's based on a role. If you stop carrying the burden, she hurts. If you pull away, she feels betrayed. And so you grow up carrying the fear of being abandoned by the very person who once leaned on you. You gradually come to believe love means sacrifice. Love has no boundaries. Love means carrying others. And you carry that twisted definition into every relationship. Becoming the one who always carries the emotions of others, always does more than needed, always ends up exhausted and confused. The truth is, you were not born to be your mother's mother. That role was never yours to hold. And now it's time to reclaim your childhood, reclaim your freedom, reclaim your right to be soft, to be needy, to be loved, without having to pay for it with responsibility. What comes next is how to begin reshaping your inner emotional world. Not by blaming, but by learning how to mother yourself all over again. 6. Reparenting isn't just self-care, it's inner liberation work. No one taught you how to mother yourself, because the day you needed arms to hold your fear, you had to become strong enough to hold someone else. Because the day you should have been asked, "Are you okay?" you were the one asking. Instead, "Mom, are you all right?" And so you grew up never knowing what it's like to be supported from within. Reparenting, becoming your own parent, is not some cute practice involving hot tea journaling and soft music. It is an act of inner liberation. It is the most powerful, disciplined, and radical work you will ever do with yourself. Because you're not just learning to love yourself. You are rewiring your entire emotional nervous system. You are reteaching yourself that resting doesn't mean laziness. Setting boundaries doesn't mean selfishness. Saying no is not rejecting love. It is protecting it. You become the mother your inner child once needed, gentle enough to listen, strong enough to protect. And no, this isn't easy, because every time you say, "I deserve love," an old voice echoes in your head. Don't ask for too much. You'll exhaust people. Every time you choose to walk away from a toxic relationship, that whisper comes back. Who will be there for them if not you? And that's the moment you must rise. Not against your mother, but against the version inside you that learned to endure instead of live. Reparenting is a journey where you are both the healer and the wounded, both the mother and the child, and that's exactly what makes it powerful, because it depends on no one else but you. No apology needed, no change from others required, only your choice to become the first and last person to never abandon yourself again. And from that foundation, a truly adult version of you begins to take shape. One who no longer lives to please, no longer acts out of fear of being left behind, but lives for one thing only you've awakened. 7. The power of emotional adulthood. Making new choices from consciousness. There's a truth no one told you when you were growing up. Physical maturity does not equal emotional maturity, and most of us, even in adult bodies, are still making decisions from the wounds of a child who was abandoned, neglected, or forced to carry too much. Emotional adulthood is when you no longer act from reflex, but begin to choose from awareness. When you no longer let anger dictate your words, fear control your actions, or old shame distort the present. You are no longer a passive victim. You are the one actively choosing again every word, every thought, every response. When someone doesn't text you back, you no longer spiral into, "What did I do wrong?" but pause and ask, "Do I really need this validation to feel worthy?" When you're complimented, you don't dismiss it, but receive it without guilt. When you fail, you don't drown in shame, but remind yourself, I can try again. And I'm not less valuable because of this. Emotional adulthood is when you stop seeking others to complete you. You stop loving to be rescued, stop working to be recognized, stop apologizing just to keep the peace. You begin to love because you're whole. You begin to act because you believe in your worth. And you know happiness isn't something to earn. It's something you have the right to create from within. You can't control everything, but you do control who you choose to be when the emotional storm hits. And in that moment, when you pause, breathe, and choose differently, you're not just living, you're being born again. That is real power, not the absence of pain, but the refusal to let pain decide who you are. And from that point on, you stop living from the legacy of pain and start living from the strength of awareness. 8. I am the end of the pattern. The beginning of your true story. You might be the first in your family to say, I will not continue this cycle. And you might also be the first to be misunderstood, criticized, labeled a traitor. But the truth is, you are not betraying anyone. You are liberating an entire generation. Because if not you, then who? If not now, then when? How many more children will grow up bearing the burden of being the good child instead of being allowed to be themselves? How many more generations will repeat the cycle of pain control and conditional love? You might be the first to say, I don't need my mother to change for me to heal. I don't need an apology. I don't need acknowledgement. I just need to reclaim my right to rewrite the story of my life from the place of power, not as a victim. You are not your wound. You are the one placing your hand on it, looking directly at it, and choosing not to let it define you anymore. And yes, you will feel lonely, but it is the loneliness of transformation. It is the moment you leave the fake safety zone and step into a journey where you are both the healer and the creator. You'll see yourself detached from relationships that no longer align, but instead you'll start connecting from values, not from lack. You'll find you no longer need approval to move forward because what you're doing is for your soul, not for someone else's acceptance. And when someone asks you, who are you to break the family tradition to live differently? Answer them with calm and conviction, I am the end of the old pattern and the beginning of a new current, where love comes without conditions, where worth needs no performance, where the child inside me finally gets to live without fear. The old story's over, and now it's your turn to pick up the pen. Write yourself anew. If this video made you pause, reflect, and look deeper into something you've long avoided, know that you are not alone. Millions have grown up with the same silence, the same distorted kind of love, the same nameless wound. And you, sitting here listening, feeling, facing, are the one brave enough to break the cycle. Leave a comment below, I am the end of the pattern. Just write that, so others know they are not walking this alone. And if you felt this video touch the deepest truth within you, hit subscribe to The Archetype, because this isn't just a place to talk about healing. It's where we awaken, empower, and walk with you into the darkest corners to return to the light within. We don't need more empty comfort. We need truth, courage, and strategy to be reborn from the inside out. Welcome to The Archetype, where the old story ends and the real one begins.